Welcome to the Business Real Talk podcast, where you'll learn straightforward and simple ways to scale your business, and we're keeping it real. I'm your host, Naza Javaria, an 18-year marketing expert and the founder of Next Level Up CEO and the Easy Yes Method. I'm also a wife, a mom of three, and a real talk strategist. On the Business Real Talk podcast, we'll dive into how you can disrupt your industry, create a pipeline of premium clients, and how to scale your revenue without scaling your time. If you're ready to dive straight into how you can use my Easy Yes method, I want to invite you to check out my free mini-series that breaks down how you can replace all of your sales and marketing efforts with just one Netflix-inspired client acquisition system that turns cold leads into raving fans in 7 days. Go check it out at easyesleads.com. I want you to leave this podcast with business strategies that are straightforward and timeless. So let's get real. Hey, and welcome back to the Business Real Talk. We are joined again here today with the incredible Jayne Havens, and we are going to talk about such an important topic that we actually started offline in Voxer, and I was like, hold up, this is such an important conversation that we decided to bring you into the behind the scenes of our conversation and bring it to the world, because the topic we're going to talk about today is the power behind making fast decisions and why this is such a key factor to developing a successful business and really just success in ourselves. And Jayne, to me, is like the epitome of a empowered, fast decision maker. She's just really freaking good at this. And I was like, who better to come have this conversation than Jayne? But before we jump in, if you're new around here and haven't met Jayne before, we're going to have her give a quick introduction and then we'll jump into it. So Jayne, take it away. Tell us a little bit about you and all the good stuff of who you are.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you as always. To give you a quick rundown, a little bit about me. I am a wife, a mother of two kids. I live in Baltimore, Maryland with my family. Before I got into entrepreneurship, I was in catering sales, which is super random. I planned weddings and corporate holiday parties and bar and bat mitzvahs in Washington, D.C. And I left catering to be a stay-at-home mom when my son was born 11 years ago. And I loved being home with him. I did all the mom things. And 4 years into my stay-at-home mom journey, my daughter was born, and she was cranky and colicky and really hard. And I blame and credit her for my pivot back into working, because she really gave me a run for my money. I was burnt out, I think, from just 4 years of being home and then add a really cranky, miserable baby. And I was like, I got to get back to work. It was not practical for me to go back to the office in a traditional sense, because my entire family had gotten really comfortable with me running the show. So I decided to start my own business working as a sleep consultant. I was always really good at getting my own kids to sleep. They were on good routines, good overnight sleepers, good nap sleepers. And that was because I put a lot of work into it. I researched a lot. I wasn't just lucky. I actually really poured a lot of effort and energy into it and reaped the rewards. And it was really wonderful for our entire family to have two kids that were in a regular routine and would reliably sleep through the night. And my friends were jealous. They wanted help. I would help them get their kids to sleep. That sort of snowballed into helping friends of friends, people I didn't even know. And I wasn't charging them. It was just a hobby. It was something I would do for fun. And eventually like a light bulb went off in my head. Maybe I should actually turn this hobby into a business. And I went online. I took a sleep consultant certification course. I got trained and started taking paying clients. And what was intended to be just like a side hustle or passion project turned into a very lucrative and also really fulfilling career. And fast forward, now I'm training others to become sleep consultants. I have almost 750 people enrolled in my certification program, which is wild and exciting and awesome. And I think as excited as I originally was about teaching babies and toddlers to sleep through the night, that's how excited I am now about teaching mostly women, a teeny tiny handful of men, to start their own businesses and to really become badass entrepreneurs, for lack of a better way of saying it.
I love it. And First of all, your intro in of itself speaks so much to like you and the decisions you make. One of the things you mentioned is that like you started to do this for yourself, you did some research, and then you decided to get certified. Do you remember at all of like how long that process was from you deciding that?
Yeah, we're like cackling and chuckling because it was super quick. Like I remember coming up with this idea and literally meeting a friend for coffee to discuss it. And you're going to laugh because my two ideas, I just knew I wanted to go back to work. Like I had to do something. I had a really challenging baby on my hands and I
Yeah.
needed something to do to distract my brain from all the crying that was going on in my house. And I had two ideas. My two ideas were to like start a spray tanning business. I think not
I
to
could
like
not
make fun of,
picture that for you.
yeah, like, we're not laughing because like spray tanning is a bad business. We're laughing because like, why would I ever have a spray tanning business? First of all, I don't even think I've ever gotten a spray tan. But
I'm laughing.
I think what happened was I think I was on Instagram and
Okay.
I was following an influencer who had a spray tanner come to her house and put up this tent and like spray tanner and it was this whole glamorous thing. And I was like, oh, like I could do that.
Good idea. Love it. Okay.
So like my two ideas were to start a spray tanning business and like the startup for that was very low, right? Like a few $100s and equipment and you're on your way. And then sleep consulting, which actually made far more sense because I was actually doing it and already good at it. And it was something
Yeah.
I was passionate about. And I met my friend for coffee. She's not an entrepreneur, but she has a big job in corporate. And she was like, this is an insane conversation. Like, you need to be a sleep consultant. And so she said to me, this is ridiculous. I can't even believe you're weighing these two.
Yeah.
And I wasn't weighing them, I just floated them. And so I floated these two ideas, and she was like, it's sleep consulting. And I was like, great. And then I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I think I'm going to start a business. And he's great. And my dad's an entrepreneur. So, like,
Yeah.
he was right away, he was like, you should do that. And so that was it. That was the end of the conversation. I don't even know if I originally discussed it with my husband, Jonathan. I think I probably did, but I didn't really seek his approval.
Yeah. You
I,
knew
I
he would
thought,
be down for whatever.
yeah, I knew it. He's not an entrepreneur. My husband's a lawyer, so he has a very, I think this is worth mentioning because his brain is very like he operates in safe mode. Like
Yes.
if I had floated this idea to him originally, that I think that's why I went to my dad because my dad's a risk taker.
Yeah.
So if I had gone to
Ooh.
Jonathan would have said, well, how much does it cost to
Yeah.
like take this course and like how much do you think you're going to make and what's it going to look like? He would have asked me like 10,000 questions that honestly I didn't even want to hear. I just wanted to get started. So like when I asked my dad, he was like, yeah, go for it. That sounds great. Whatever, you
Yeah.
know? And that's what I wanted to hear and that's what I needed to hear. And I think I specifically went to him
Mm.
because I knew he would give me his blessing and he'd be like, he wouldn't even flinch.
Yeah.
And relatively speaking, the startup costs to get certified were also reasonable. I spent a couple $1,000s to take a training. He understands because
Yeah.
he's built many businesses before that like spending $2,000 or $3,000 to get yourself up and running in the grand scheme of things is
It's
not
not
a
that
big
much.
deal.
Yeah.
And just go for it. What do you have to lose? What's the big deal? Just
So
do
what do
it.
you think from the conversation you had in the coffee shop with your friend to like going out and doing it? How long do you think that was?
Honestly, I think it was like the next day. I can't swear to it, but that's how I remember it in my mind. Was like
So fast.
I floated the idea to my friend Leia, and I wasn't meeting with her to have this conversation. We just happened to have a coffee date, and
Yeah.
this was what was on my mind. I
Yeah.
wasn't like meeting with her to get her approval. I just floated the idea, and she was like, "This is great." And then I called my dad, and he was like, "Yeah, do it." And then that was the end of that. And I'm pretty sure I I got started. That was
You,
it.
and here's my question for you because one, that's obviously really fast. I don't think everyone does that. And I want to share a quick story with you about what I just recently did that it was crazy for me. But I think one of the biggest questions I would have from that is, do you think that you were the type of person who made fast decisions like all the time? Was this your personality? Was this your style?
It's a good question. I think I grew up, if I'm being completely transparent, I grew up with a safety net. Making big decisions weren't as scary for me, I think, because I knew I wasn't going to be in the gutter if I made a bad
Yeah.
choice. My first job out of college, I look, when you get a a decent job out of college, you just take it, right? Because
Yeah.
we've never had any other jobs before. But I took a job, whatever job I got offered right out of college, which was a decent job, not well paying, but like a good experience
Yeah.
job. And then my second job out of college was a pretty much entire commission based job, like
That's
my,
scary.
for most people.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think I was just, again, I discussed it with my father and he's, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like,
Yeah.
just go. You're going to be good at this.
That's
Like
cool.
it was, he just said to me, what's the worst that happens? If you don't knock it out of the park, like you'll just go get another job.
Yeah.
And I think that one, that accepting that job, I think really positioned me to be confident in my own ability to be successful in
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
because I was like 23 years old, 24 years old at the time, taking a job where my salary was like $25,000, which was
Yeah.
not enough to live on. I lived in Washington, D.C., and everything else was commission. And
Yeah.
that felt
That's a
very
risk.
scary. It was a risk. Well, and I think they guaranteed a certain salary for my first year. And after that, it was like, you're on your
On your
own.
own.
But
Yeah.
I very quickly realized like I was going to be able to make some money in this business.
Yeah.
And I was good at what they hired me to do. And I think that experience, and maybe it's because I had a safety net, like I knew if I was unemployed and I couldn't, if I had to come home to my parents, I would be allowed to do that.
Wasn't the
Like
end of the world.
it wasn't going to be the end of the
Yeah.
world. And I think that maybe that experience really positioned me to be a risk taker and realize that
Yeah.
no one decision was going to ruin me. And so I've lived on that edge ever since.
I think that's I love that you said no one decision is going to break me. It's not going to kill me. Right. And I will tell you, my story is very different than your story. I was the opposite. Like I was the worst at making decisions. So like growing up, I couldn't even decide what to wear, what to eat. I was like one of those annoying people who I'd go to dinner and I'd be like, can you pick? Because I don't want to pick. Like I was very the opposite, and taking risks scared me a lot for whatever reason. And it's funny, I think that part of it is, so I wonder, I'm sure we can do the research, but I'm sure environment shifts that as well. Like my dad was an entrepreneur too, but it was very like, they immigrated to the US, and like they didn't have a safety net. So everything was like, we have to make sure this works. And not to say that they weren't risk takers, but I think I developed almost the opposite, where I was always so nervous and scared. And so for my entire like childhood up until I want to say I was like 21, I was very scared of taking risks. I was very afraid of making decisions. And I share this because, much like Jayne, I now make really fast decisions and I don't think twice about them. And I think it's good to see that it doesn't mean you have to inherently have been like born with this or have this, because I think a lot of people make that excuse of, well, that's just not my personality. When I don't really believe that. I think it really is the trust we build in ourselves and how we develop that. Like to the point that, like I said, I used to not be able to decide. My husband used to hate it. He'd be like, just pick where we should go to dinner when we first had met. And I'd be like, no, you pick. I don't want to pick the wrong place. It freaked me out of making a wrong decision when it was so stupid. Like you said, how is picking the wrong food going to matter? Fast forward to now, I think it was last week on Wednesday, my mom was like, I'm going to be in Italy. I'm going to miss you guys. We'll be gone for 3 months. And I was like, I wonder, I've never taken the kids out of the country. I didn't have it on my mind. We don't even have our passports up to date. And that Thursday, I sat down and started looking at tickets. I bought the tickets on Friday. And my husband, we don't even have passports. And I was like, screw it. And just to put it in perspective, I was like, if we're going to do this, we're going to fly business class, huge expense. Like it was really scary. But I was like, this is fine. My husband's, we've never gone on a long trip with the kids. What are you going to do for a 15-hour flight? And I was like, we'll figure it out. And to me, that speaks volumes of we can grow into a space of trusting ourselves and making big decisions. And it really, to me, is exactly what you and I have said over and over again. How much do I trust myself? It's not so much the decision I'm making. Yes, there's an amount of paying attention and making the right choices, but ultimately it's I and you know that whatever decision I make is going to work out. It's always going to be what needs to happen. And I think that to me is a big piece of it.
And I think even when it doesn't work out, because I can think of a lot of things that I've done that haven't worked out, but they've still been learning lessons.
Afraid of that. I think that's an important, like failure isn't, to me, I don't really believe in failure. I'm like, nothing I do is going to failure. I've learned something from it, exactly like what you said. But I think ultimately Yeah, whether or not it's that it's a good decision, it's that it's a decision I've made and I can stick behind it and know that I'm going to get something out of it, even if it's a learning lesson. And you and I have had
Every
that
single time.
conversation.
Every single time.
Yeah.
And sometimes those learning lessons that are like expensive mistakes are even
More
more
valuable.
valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're even more valuable than like things that you've done that weren't mistakes.
Yeah. So with that being said, share with us a big mistake you may have made that was a big value one. Because I think we've all get a little afraid and get in our heads of the big failure or the big thing that goes wrong. Can you remember a time that you made a decision that didn't pan out, didn't work out how you had expected it to? And how did you handle it?
Yeah, all the time. So as my business has grown, I have hired people to support me in my business. And in recent examples I can give you are bloggers or people to help me with Google ads or Facebook ads, just like business B2B support people, right? And I think that there's so many people out there who are touting themselves as experts
Mm,
and that they know that they can help you and they know everything. And meanwhile, they're just making it up as they go. I was just actually on the phone with my dad and I was talking to him about this because we were talking about like my next steps were like, how am I going to grow my business to be
mhm.
like, what's the next step? And I was saying to him, the hard part about this is that I need to rely on other people at this point to grow. Like,
Can't do it on
I
your own.
can't, I can't get it that much further on my own. I really need to trust some support people to like help me get to the next level. And the problem is everybody loves to tell you that they know what they're doing and a lot of people don't. So
Yeah.
I've hired several people who have told me they know what they're doing and they don't. And maybe I've worked with them for 6 months before fully realizing that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And 6 months of spending $1,500 or $2,000 a month, whatever it is, plus if you're doing ad spend, that can cost a lot of money.
Yeah. And
That's an
time.
expense and time at right time too, because all this time, if I had hired the right person, I would have been so much further ahead. But I think that they are learning lessons because now I know what to look for
Mm.
and I know what questions to ask. And I am that much closer to figuring out who the right support people are for my business. And to use blogging as an example, I actually have an incredible blogger right now who is doing amazing things for my business. And it took me, I think he's the third or fourth person that I've hired to help me with this one task.
Yeah.
And I guess I probably maybe I didn't need to make those mistakes to get to him, but I was better positioned to understand his value because of the mistakes I had made previously.
Well, and I think there's an important thing you said, right? Like, I get a lot of people in my industry who come to me and they're so afraid of investing because of the decisions they've made in the past that didn't pan out the way they wanted to. And I think the key factor to that is it's either going to drive you or it's going to break you, right? It's either going to tell you and you're going to make it about you. So in that case, you could have been like, I hired this person, I spent X amount of money, and you could have made it about you. Like, I should have done better. I should have known better. I should have looked for these things. Or you could say, okay, great, that sucks. It was not great, not a good experience. What can I get from it? And how can I use that to drive my next decision? And I think that to me is a huge factor because I get on the phone with people all the time who are like, you sound amazing. I'm so scared because of the decisions I've made in the past. And I'm like, that's not a reflection of you. And I think that's an important, I think that to me, when I look at it that way, I'm like, I don't look at a bad decision, and I'm using air quotes if you're listening on the podcast. I don't look as a bad decision as being a reflection of me. I think it's a growth opportunity for me. And even if I, yeah, could have done more research or done this or done that, I don't look at it from that standpoint because that just takes us down this rabbit hole of creating and instilling a lack of trust in ourselves that, in my opinion, does nobody any good. Like, that whole idea of, like you said, you didn't want to go to Jonathan and tell him, and then he's going to bring up all these things. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's you want to act and move from a place of like feeling good about yourself and making good decisions, not from a lack of trust in yourself and feeling like everything I do is going to be wrong going forward. I see that a lot in this industry and it pisses me off, both from the standpoint of I get it. We've all been burned. I've been burned. You've been burned. Everyone's had those experiences, but it's what we do with it that, in my opinion, says a lot more about you than if we just sit there in fear and act from a place of I can't make another decision because this decision didn't pan out. Like, to me, that's not growth. That's not us moving in the right direction. And if anything, that just breaks us rather than driving us. But I don't know. Tell me your opinions on that first and
Yeah.
foremost.
So what I was thinking is that there's that quote. I don't know if it's Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan or whatever it is.
Wayne
Like
Gretzky, I think.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't
Yep.
take. Right. That's one of my favorite entrepreneurial quotes, and I live by that. I take a lot of shots.
Yeah.
I take a lot of shots, and that's talking to a lot of people, investing in a lot of support people, trying a lot of new things. Like I'm always doing something. And when someone comes to me and says like my business isn't growing or I can't figure out how to get it off the ground or I want to do this but I'm scared. Like I always say if you don't take the shot, then
You can't
make
complain
it
about it
it.
either. Yeah. You can't make it
Yeah,
and you
like
can't complain about it.
yeah, like you literally miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you're not taking shots, then you're not making baskets if we're going to continue with the metaphor. And so I take shots all day long. And that's talking to people that maybe I'm intimidated to talk to, starting conversations with people that I'm not sure if they want to have a conversation. Like
Yeah.
none of that scares me because you got to take shots all day long.
You gotta take
And
shots and
really
it's like,
that's
what's the worst that's gonna happen? Like your dad
yeah,
was saying, like, okay, great, you do this. What happens if it goes wrong? And I think that's a
yeah.
mental state of you do have to tell yourself, like, I make decisions now from a place of what's the worst that can happen? What am I gonna gain out of this? What would I do in this situation rather than being stuck in it? My question to you is, why do you think that so many people struggle to make decisions in the first place? What do you think is like the main factors of this?
Well, I think that you touched on it earlier. It's that they don't trust themselves, right? Like they're so worried about whether it's like fear of failure, like this big picture of impending doom. Like
Yeah.
one thing, it's really wild because I talk to people all day long who are scared to do things. Like I sit on calls all day long with people who are interested in getting into my field. They want to become sleep consultants,
Mhm.
but they have a million things that they're scared of, right? Am I going to be able to find clients? Am I going to be able to help families? Am I going to build a successful business? Am I? And it's like a lack of trust in themselves.
Mhm.
And they spend so much time worrying about the what if I can't make enough money to replace my existing income, just like using that as an example. Well, like that's a ridiculous thing to worry about before you've even taken a training and gotten started. Like
Yeah.
you can't worry about how you're going to replace your existing income that it took you 20 years to get to that point in your
Mm.
career, right? That's unreasonable, right?
I like
So instead of worrying about this like big end game, lofty goal that is nowhere within reach, you have to start with, do I even think I have the interest in this to finish the course?
yeah.
Do I even think I'm interested enough or passionate enough or excited enough about this work to want to get out there and talk to people about it, right?
Mhm.
Like the tiny little things. And so I think that people sometimes they focus on the
Right.
big goal, the end game, and then they freeze up and
Mm.
they're like, I can't do this. It's too scary. And really, if they were to just focus on like the baby steps, it would all feel so much more doable. And so, like, when I say yes to myself, I'm just saying yes to that one thing, that one
Yeah.
moment. Like, let's use the like when I decided to get certified to do this work. I wasn't saying, yes, I'm going to be able to build this six
Yeah.
figure income or whatever. I wasn't saying yes to anything other than I'm committed to learning something new that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
And I'm committed to trying something that I've never tried before. And it really excites me. And it gives me those butterflies in my stomach that I want to learn more and I want to get involved in this. And once I finish the course, then I'm going to figure out the next steps.
Yeah.
Right. If I was so worried about like, how am I going to form an LLC and who's going to
You
make
would have
my
you would have
website?
yeah, you would have pushed yourself to that, like, doubt and fears. Those are the things that
none
get
of
us there.
none of those things were relevant in that moment. So I guess I just live more in the moment and make
Yeah.
decisions based on the now and the immediate relevancy. And beyond that, I figure that out later. Like I figure it out one step at a time and I try
Yeah.
not to get too ahead of myself. And whenever I decide on the next big thing that I'm going to work on in my business, whether it's making an investment or just like trying to learn a new skill or putting myself
Yeah.
on a new platform or whatever it is, it's like when I just decide I'm ready to do that, then I just do
Do
that.
it.
And then
Yeah. Well, and I think
Good.
there's like that saying that it's about seeing the next step, not the whole staircase. And I think that's the truth. You're so right because it's easy I think that's what causes that overwhelm and like overthinking is that we start to think 10, 15 steps ahead. And we've been taught that. I think that in reality, we've been inundated with this idea that we have to look at 10 steps ahead. And yes, we do to a certain extent, but at the same time, we're making a decision for this right now. What's the most immediate decision I need to make? And I think that's a big takeaway for those of you who are listening is like, what is the immediate decision I need to make that's resolving what I'm in right now, the thing I need right now? And then recognizing, and again, that's to me a combination of making that decision and seeing the decision for the here and now versus trying to overthink and over exaggerate all these things that could happen. That's like the seeing the whole staircase. But then two is trusting yourself, knowing that when you make that decision, it's a series of trust, right? Like how much trust do I, same thing goes. If I'm making a decision, I'm looking at it, is this something I want to do right now? Yes. Then that tells me, okay, great. I'm going to do it and I'm going to make out of it what I need to happen. And I think those two things really do go hand in hand. I know because I've said this to you a million times, and I'll say it even for myself. I truly do believe that making decisions is a huge factor to success. And just to give you guys a quick idea, since I'm so into psychology of decisions, whether you realize it or not, we make upwards of 35,000 decisions a day. That blew my mind when I looked up that statistic. And just to share with you how crazy that number is, we take on average 20,000 breaths in a day, which means for every breath we're taking, we're almost making two decisions. And I told my kids that and they're like, what the heck? And I was like, you got to think from, should I turn right? Should I turn left? Should I you put my hair up? Those are all micro decisions we're making in a singular day. And if you think about it, our ability to make small and big decisions faster is absolutely going to drive success. And I think that understanding that blew my mind because I realized the faster I could make a decision and take action from that, the faster I was going to move to that. But for you, how do you see making decisions quickly as a contributing or main factor to your success?
So I personally find that when I make faster decisions, I don't know if this is typical for all people, but I feel this way for myself, that when I just make quick decisions, it lessens my own anxiety about stuff. I'm not harping on things. Recently, I was exploring hiring somebody to help me in an area of my business. And I was discussing it with my assistant, Allie, and she was pointing out all the reasons not to hire this person. And she was right, by the way. But I'm more hasty than her. And I just wanted to like get a move on and give him a shot and get it going and see what happened. And she was pointing out all the red flags. And I get that. And I hear you and I appreciate you because you're not wrong, but I just want to like give it a shot. And I didn't want to harp on it. And I just got it going. And a very quick month in, 3 weeks in, like we both knew she was right and we had to wrap it up and be done real quick. But I don't regret that because it showed me all the things that I don't want in this type of
Yeah.
service provider. And I didn't spend all this time overthinking all the stuff that like I could have been really worried about.
Yeah.
I gave it a shot. It didn't work out. It wasn't a big deal. Moving on. And now I'm actually even more motivated to find another person to fill those shoes because I was going to have somebody to help me in that
Yeah.
area and now I don't. So before it was like, do I even really need this person? Does it even really matter if we have this person helping us in this way? But now I really want to find somebody to do
Yeah.
it, right? So it's put the fuel to the fire, even though it wasn't a great fit and it didn't work out. Now I'm like really committed to finding the right person. And it was like a micro mistake. It's not a big deal. And I just find that when I harp on things for a long time, then I start talking to a lot of different people about it. Too many cooks in the kitchen, too many opinions. I like to make my own decisions.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have a sounding board, but you and we do this all the time. Like I tell you something and then you give me like a bunch of reasons to think differently. And I was like, I appreciate that, but no. And then I move on. And usually like you're usually right. But like we just do things differently or
differently.
whatever. And it just works for me to just shotgun it and see what happens.
Well, and I think that there's an important thing that the board, my husband calls it a board of advisors. Like we all have a board of advisors that we go to. You mentioned at the beginning that like you went to your dad instead of your husband at the beginning because you knew that was a board of advisor that you thought was going to help you make a solid decision. And maybe that you just did need a validation to say yes. And you didn't want someone who was going to find all the reasons, right? And I think that it's an important conversation that I don't think a lot of people have actively thought about. Like we all have a board of advisors. It could be our dads, it could be our spouse, it could be a friend, it could be another entrepreneur, it could be whoever. But we have people that we also trust to go to in certain situations that we think are going to help us make better decisions. And I think that, or whether it's making better decisions or it's going to give us the opposite side, I think you actively know that if you come ask me a question, you're coming because I'm going to give you the other side. I'm never just going to be like, good job, go do it. You come in knowing that. There's no reason. Like at this point, we've known each other long enough that I don't think you'd come in and I'd just be like, good job, go do it. I'm going to give you the other side. And I think the more we recognize that there are certain people we go to when we know we just need that validation, like you said, for your dad, you just needed someone who would say, yeah, it's a good idea. Let's go. And sometimes you do need a sounding board or someone who can give you the other side of it and let you have it and allows you to make a decision. And I don't think that what you choose to do, I don't think it's impulsive. I think it's you standing in conviction. I think there's a difference. And I think while, yes, it does allow you to make shotgun decisions, I think it comes from a place of conviction that you have this conviction of, I know what I want. And I know that I think this is the right decision. And whatever comes from it, I'm going to learn or grow from it. It doesn't make a difference. And I think that conviction does play a huge role because whether it's conviction in a bigger picture or in a singular decision, we do it. Like I'll use the example again, like booking those tickets to Italy. My husband was against it. He was like anti. Once I pulled the trigger and my husband's like yours, where he thinks of all these other things. I was like, no, we're going to do it and we'll figure it out. I made the decision. He then came back and was like, I'm really excited. I think this is a great thing. I had to stand in my conviction, even though when he was like, no, I don't think this is a great idea. Let's not do this. Because sometimes we have to trust that. We have to trust that we have intuition. I hate to say that. We have a sense of intuition. We have a sense of what we believe in and what we truly think is going to be what we need or what we want and standing in that. And I think so many people let others dictate that. If you came to me, I know that you're going to make a decision whether or not I say it or not, right? And I think I know because you are so convicted in what you believe in. And I think a lot of people lack that conviction, which does come from a sense of trust and all that they do let people derail them or make them question, or they let themselves get derailed or question what they're doing. So all that to say that I think that there's some contributing factors if we really looked at it that really do go into it. And I think one of the powerful things is you trust yourself and you stand in conviction. You make decisions and you're like, I know what I want and I know what I'm going to go after. Tell us some of the decisions. I have two questions for you. One of them is, I know you've talked a lot about the safety net you had, right? Like you had a safety net and stuff. Not everybody listening does, right? Not everyone has that safety net. And maybe this is a question you can or can't answer, but because I know you have a lot of clients who don't have safety nets. How do you think that affects the decision-making process? And or what would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't have a safety net and doesn't have that ability in making decisions? What is your input on that?
Yeah, look, I'm an adult now. I make my own financial decisions. Like, I'm not relying on anybody else to take care of me. I was just referencing when I was younger and was coming up in the
Yeah.
world. And I do think that opportunity to fail without huge consequence was instrumental in maybe building my own confidence. Like I
Mhm.
had an experience where I could take a huge risk without huge consequence,
Yeah.
right? So for me, like that did probably position me to be less scared to
Yeah.
do things moving forward. Most people I recognize don't have that privilege to take a ginormous risk without feeling the wrath of the consequence if it doesn't work out. That being said, what I see people struggling with are not like huge monumental decisions, at least not in my opinion. I see people really struggling to make like
Small.
micro decisions.
Yeah.
People will lament over like which SEO course to take to learn blogging or whatever. And
Yeah.
I would literally just pick one and move on. I think that people struggle to make decisions big and small,
True.
and probably starting with making those smaller decisions. And I
Mm,
think it all goes back to trust in yourself. Like when someone is lamenting over which course to take and it's a $250 course or a $179 course and they can't figure out which one do I take, and so they're not taking either. I think what they're really saying is I don't trust myself to finish this. I don't
yeah.
trust myself to actually
Ooh,
do this and learn from it, right? I don't think they're worried about whether or not the course is going to get them results.
yeah.
I think that they're worried about their own follow through.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's something that I've never worried about with myself because I have an incredible work ethic and I
Yeah.
always have. And I know that when I invest in myself or make a decision, I'm going to follow through on it
Mhm.
to the end. And I think really the reason people struggle to make decisions is not because it's going to put them into financial ruin if they make the wrong decision. It's because they don't trust themselves to actually get
Yeah.
whatever return on investment that
That they are
they
putting in.
are wanting to get out of the experience. Yes, that is my answer.
And I agree wholeheartedly because like I said, you and I come from different like starting points of I wasn't a someone who just made decisions quickly. I wasn't someone who was willing to take risks and I came from a place of that. And I will say one of the things is that we lack that clarity and that trust in ourselves and we lack the ability to have that work ethic. And to me it's a matter of it's not if, it's when. It really is like when am I going to achieve this? How am I going to do this? So I think it's looking at those and really being able to achieve that. With that being said, I want to wrap it up because I appreciate your time here with us. But if someone was questioning about how should I help myself make better decisions, what's a key takeaway you might leave somebody with? Of like how they may be able to make more of those better. Maybe it's starting with micro decisions, maybe it's whatever. Any feedback or takeaways that you can leave with them about either making those decisions, how it's turned out for you, or anything like that that you think would be a good place?
Yeah, I guess maybe looking back into past decisions that maybe felt like wrong decisions and see if you can
Mm,
find those silver linings. Because I think really a lot of it is mindset, right? Like when you think you made a huge mistake, okay, maybe it was a huge mistake, but what did you learn from that experience? How did it position you to grow? Was it really the end of the world that you did X, Y, and Z, and it
yeah.
resulted in A, B, and C, whatever? I think looking back to past experiences where you feel like you really screwed it up, did you really? Was it that big of a deal? And if not, then okay, here we go. Let's keep it moving. And sure, practicing with making decisions that are not as big of a deal. Although I would argue that actually making small decisions, like when there is no big
Nothing to
risk or
lose.
reward,
Yeah.
that stuff doesn't matter. I actually think really the way to grow is by making those scary decisions.
Yeah.
And just like anything else with growth, whether it be in entrepreneurship or sports or academics, like
Yeah.
the way you get better is by practicing and with repetition. And I guess if I think back to the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, I probably had more fear in making decisions than I do now. I definitely did, right? This is a muscle that you have to exercise.
Yeah.
So the more sort of decisions you can make, the more steps you can take in a forward motion, the easier it gets to continue to grow. And I think the anxiety subsides when you really start just like doing it more regularly. It's no different than the first time you go running. It's
Yeah.
hard AF.
And every time you do it.
And then you run every day and then all of a sudden you're like, "Wait, I can run." Right? So,
Yeah.
I think that decision making is the same thing.
Okay, I love that. So Jane's big takeaway is that I love what you said, that it's about really looking back at some past decisions and recognizing the silver lining of it, of what you did grow and learn out of it. And one thing I'll leave you guys with is a key thing that when my clients come to me and they're struggling with making decisions, is I'll ask them to actually look at what's the worst case scenario. What is the worst case scenario and how could you resolve that? So for me, when I was first starting my business, I used to say, well, oh my gosh, if I don't make this work, like we don't have the money coming in. And I'd be like, okay, great, I could go get a job. Like it's not the end of the world. And it's like tricking your brain to actually recognizing that it is safe and it is okay to make that decision and going from there. So those are two little things that you guys can test out and try in your decision making process. And again, the power of making fast decisions truly is going to exponentialize everything you do in business and life and everything that we're happening and the trust that we're instilling in ourselves and creating that conviction. And again, thank you so much, Jane, for being here with us. And thank you, those of you who are listening. And as always, thanks for keeping it real. you so much for joining me on this episode of the Business Real Talk podcast. If you're serious about accelerating your growth, doubling or tripling your revenue, and going from the best kept secret to the only and incomparable solution in your industry, then be the first to listen to each episode by hitting subscribe and sharing with a friend. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Next Level Up CEO to learn more about how you can declutter your marketing and leverage the Easy Yes method in your business to focus on results and create a truly scalable and sustainable business that doesn't suck up all of your time. To get a sneak peek at my proprietary methodology that has allowed my clients to double or triple their revenue, go check out my free mini-series that shows you exactly how you can replace all of your sales and marketing efforts with just one organic and evergreen client acquisition system that brings in premium clients on repeat. Go to easyesleads.com to access the mini-series now. And as always, stay tuned for next week's episode on the Business Real Talk. Until then, keep it real.